Hi, friends. Welcome to Charlie and Steve Watch Stuff, where today we are watching Scream. My name's Steve Selnick, and joining me today, as always, he just wants to know what your favorite scary movie is. It's my good friend, Charlie Peppers. Charlie, how are you doing on this very much so not Halloween-like Sunday in August?
September 1st.
It's September 1st, you're right. You're totally right.
1st.
September still feels like August. That's right. It's the beginning of the good weather in San Francisco, so it feels like summer for me. I'm sure it feels like summer all the time in LA.
Not really. I mean, September is, I think, when it gets the hottest in LA. Late August, early September is when it very much gets high 90s, like low hundreds. I first moved to Los Angeles 13 years ago around this time, and I remember it just being very, very hot, and that hasn't changed.
Same, actually. I did also move there in early September, and it welcomed me with hot valley temperatures. I was in my tiny little pool very often on Cahuenga Boulevard. Shout out to Cahuenga Boulevard. Anyway, that's not why we're here. I guess we're kind of here to talk about LA because we're here to talk about Scream. We're here, I guess this is technically, we're calling this season 2. What are seasons? What is anything? What is time but a flat circle? If you know, you know. But we took a little bit of a break. Charlie raised a whole bunch of money for a short film called Stakeout that we're really, really excited about. But we're coming back at you in late September, early October. So we decided to come back with a vengeance, like the masked man himself, Jason Voorhees, right? Was he the masked one? Or is that Michael Myers? Was Michael the masked one?
They both wear masks, Steven.
I'm showing my ass already.
To anyone listening, Steve is not a scary movie fan. He
beat me too.
He is not, and I am a scary movie enthusiast to the point where my weirdo ass will curl up in bed and put a horror film on to fall asleep. That's how much I love the genre. I can't believe you do that. I can't believe you don't. It's so good. It's so cozy.
Listen, I watch actual cozy things when I want to.
Like what?
Like City Builder video game. Shout out to City Planner Plays. He's great, and his voice is smooth, butter, nice and relaxing. I don't tend to fall asleep to blood curdling screams. I'm the kind of person where if my partner is watching something out in the living room and the gunshots are too loud, I have to go ask her to very meekly to turn it down. And if I can hear the gunshots through the headphones, it's not me, man. But I'm glad that it's you.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I love having a TV in my room.
Fair enough. Well, we are coming back in season 2 with a month's worth of horror films, starting out with this first one, Scream, that we're going to cover, mostly because I needed to have a physical representation of how deeply I love Charlie, and there's no better way to show it than by willingly watching scary movies and then talking about them on a podcast about. Well, I gotta say, this one didn't get me as much. Only a couple scenes got me in this one. It was sillier than I remember. Scream I've seen before. Some of the other movies that we have coming up that we have planned, I have never seen before. There's actually one that we're going to see that neither of us have seen before, which is going to be fun. Before we get started, because we've already established that I'm not a horror film guy, don't love it. And we're establishing here that Charlie is very much so a horror film guy, likes to watch horror films as he curls up in bed to go into terrible dreamland at night. So Charlie, why? Why this genre? Why does it speak to you? Why do you love it so much?
It does tension really well. It does chase scenes really well. It also, things are constantly happening in a horror film. And the problem with movies that don't quite hit are that they spoon feed the audience. The audience knows what's going to happen next. The beautiful thing about a horror film is that you are on the edge of your seat. You're being given information as the lead character or final girl, as they call it in the horror genre. So you literally are in the place of the character in a very vulnerable life or death situation, trying to figure out, is the killer behind door number 1? Are they behind door number 2? how's this person going to survive? It's usually a civilian who has to use their wits to get out of this larger than life scenario. It really is fun, and you can do so many things with the horror genre. I think that the horror genre has a lot in common with musicals. The characters are so pent up with emotion that they can't help but burst into song, and you can play around with different metaphors and different themes. With horror, you can do that as well. It isn't just about the killer, it's about the killer representing something in society, representing something that needs to get out or something that needs to be expressed through violence, because otherwise people would ignore it. It very much is a genre that can do multiple things and can really cover a lot of ground. I love horror. It's probably my favorite. Yeah, it's my favorite genre.
Cool. Well, hey, I love you, and I'm excited to dig into the genre. Very much so willingly. Blink 3 times if you're here on your own volition. I'm 100% into it. And I will say, we're going to get into Scream right now, but one thing that I noticed right away with Scream was how hard it dug into the horror genre, and I think how much love it expressed for the horror genre by sort of making fun of it the whole time. But we'll get into it. We'll get into the film itself, and that'll take us into Scream itself, which was released on December 20th, 1996. Screenplay by Kevin Williamson, directed by Wes Craven. Ever heard of him? Starring Neve Campbell, David Arquette, Courtney Cox, and then a few other that guys. If you watch the rewatchables, there are definitely some that guys in this movie. And the plot of the movie is a year after Sydney, and that's Neve Campbell's mom, is murdered, more murders start to occur. She begins to suspect if these murders are related and tries to find the killer, as everyone seems to be a suspect. And we'll go directly into Act 1, featuring not really that guy, it's Drew fucking Barrymore. But we get an opening scene with Drew Barrymore, which I think in 1996, this opening scene probably actually caused people to shit their pants, because throughout all of this spooky phone call, you get all of these horror tropes. She leaves the popcorn on the stove. Her boyfriend's tied up in the backyard. She quickly realizes that the call's coming from inside the house. But from start to finish, you're like, yeah, but this is Drew Barrymore. Drew Barrymore gets killed violently with her parents listening to it on the phone. I forgot about that part. Listening to someone slowly get stabbed to death on the phone when it's your daughter must be absolutely terrifying. This is actually the one scene that kind of scared me a little bit. And then the film kind of gets sillier and sillier from here, but it also establishes the killer, establishes that they're obsessed with horror movies. Drew kind of plays into it a little bit, and eventually it becomes real. And you're like, okay, so here's the setup. The serial killer is here. Ghostface is doing his thing. What do you think, Charlie? It's kind of like an iconic scene in film history if you really think about it, right?
It's an extremely iconic scene. Drew Barrymore was top billed on the poster. She was the face that many people were coming to see when they announced this film. So killing her off, that was a very gutsy move, and I believe that Drew pushed for that just for shock value. I love this cold open for the film because it does a lot of things well. It sets up what the killer's gimmick is. The gimmick is calling someone on the phone and putting them through this trivia of whether or not they know what certain horror films are. I thought that it was really, really well done. A question for you, Steve. I'm wondering now, if someone were to randomly call you multiple times like they did Drew Barrymore in this movie, what would your reaction be?
Multiple times? I mean, it's probably the reason why I didn't watch horror movies, because that shit felt too real. I would be losing my mind after the second one, probably. I'd be calling people I knew, calling emergency, all of it. We're also way too paranoid these days, very rightfully so.
Yeah.
It's so fun, even to just those old style phones and the way she walked around with it. And it was wild every single time she was he's calling again. I guess I got to pick it up again. You don't have to pick it up again. You could just figure out what the hell you're doing with yourself. But willingly distracted is definitely one of those tropes that they lead into.
Yeah. Yes. And to what you said, with technology and with cell phones now, we can see if something's an unknown number. We can see if it's potentially a telemarketer. We can see so many things that flash across the screen before we pick it up. It's kind of an extinct way of being, just picking up the phone, not knowing who it's going to be. I never do that. I let that shit go to voicemail.
If they have something to say to me and it's not a number I know, they can definitely say it in voicemail first.
Absolutely. Or shoot me a text.
100%.
Shoot me a goddamn text.
Let me know what's up, please and thank you. I'm not going to answer your stranger phone call. We then cut to the true protagonist of the movie. That's Sidney Prescott, who's attempting to cope on the anniversary 1 year ago. Her mother was brutally murdered and her dad is going out of town. And we have this whole scene where her boyfriend sneaks into the house and she's being rightfully prudish because A, she's in fucking high school, and B, also, like, she's trying to cope with her mother being raped and murdered. So I guess not being very sexually forthcoming. But then after they make out and do a little over the clothes stuff, she then flashes him before he leaves. So I guess she's like sort of into it, but not all the way there yet. It's weird because I think, and maybe you can disagree with me here because we've both seen this movie before, but from this very moment, and I think this is true throughout the movie tells you exactly what's happening the whole time, but they do it in a way where I think if you're watching it for the first time, they're like, no, that's too obvious. And you're like trying to fit in there, and they leave some other threads open enough that you're like kind of questioning it. This time around, the boyfriend is so obviously a murderous psychopath from the very beginning. It was comical to me. Like, I found myself giggling along for the rest of the movie because I think the movie is like, no, it's him. And we're going to make it really obvious that it's him the whole time. By the way, he just kind of like looks and acts. But if you're watching this for the first time, we're also going to make you question it a little bit. I think they do a really good job from establishing that from like scene number one.
I'm going to push back a little bit. I think a lot of people looked like how he looked in the 90s. That was kind of like the...
I'm not talking about how he was dressed. I'm talking about how he looked at her. How he like looked haggard and looked like a fucking psychotic monster the entire time. Like he looked at her like he wanted to consume her.
He looked at her
and not
like
just
she
like
was,
that way.
He looked at her like she was a bowl of Cookie Crisp. I think that is definitely what it was giving. Maybe I'm protective of that character because I think that this is one of the best performances in the film. And I think it's one of the best performances.
Oh, I don't think it's bad.
No. I think the movie is, his character is doing multiple, it's kind of a Trojan horse, him wanting to consume her and him wanting to go to the next level with her. Just the eroticism of that, just because of how his mom broke...
got one of those things.
The way that her mom broke apart his family, so there's a lot of weird psychosexual shit going on there. But if you watch the things that he's doing with his face and his body language and just his eyes throughout scenes with other people, I think that it is so fascinating watching this, knowing that he's the killer, because you're really able to just see what he's thinking each step of the way. I definitely think that there is nuance. I think that him being a little bit obvious is more maybe the choice in editing of let's get him giving her this really crazy look just to kind of telegraph it a little bit more.
Well, actually, I think you did a better job of explaining the point I was trying to make with what you just said. When you, on a second watch through, when you know that he's the guy the whole time, you watch the way he acts closer, and the way that he acts is not just like, oh, how could it be him? He was so normal the whole time. He was not normal the whole time. He was very much so not normal ever in this. And his best friend was also very much so not normal the whole time, in a much more frantic, like, I'm actually just kind of following along and getting some cheap thrills out of this. You could see, I think you're exactly right. You could see those wheels turning the whole time and stuff like that. And you can see, and we're about to get to this, and we'll just get right into it. The next night, she's home alone. Sydney is home alone, and she gets attacked by Ghostface in her house. She was going to go over to her friend's house and spend the night over there. Didn't get to have that chance. And after this really intense struggle, and one point that you were making, Charlie, before we started recording, Ghostface gets fucking throttled like multiple times throughout this movie, and she gets like a couple of good kicks on him. He goes, like, whoever was the stunt actor playing Ghostface in these scenes must have been told to, like, hey, like, ham these falls up, like, go as vertical as, or go as horizontal as you can whenever these kicks hit your chest, because he took some shots.
Yeah, Yes, and I want to back up a little bit. I love that scene. I want to get into Neve Campbell, who is one of my scream queens. Literally, she is a linchpin of this genre, and she is in so many of my favorite things that have ever been made, one of which we'll cover on the pod. I want to give flowers to Stu, the actor who plays Stu, who also plays Shaggy in the Scooby-Doo franchise, for how he, during that scene when they're just in the courtyard, it's him, it's Skeet, who plays Billy, it's Neve Campbell, it's my girl Rose McGowan from Charmed, and they're all just debriefing about how Drew Barrymore got killed. And like you said, Stu, he has a lot of frantic energy, and if you watch the way that Billy is fucking looking at him that entire scene, because Stu does this several times. He comes so close to just telling on himself and just outright being like, oh, we did it. And Billy's like, shut the fuck up. Don't say that. You know, and it's very, on second watch, like you said, it's very obvious. Even the way that I love the blocking of that scene, because you have Sydney and Tatum, her friend, in the middle sitting on the fountain, and then on the outskirts you have the boys, and you have Billy kind of like leaning behind Sydney, kind of on the outskirts, observing everything from afar, which really shows what kind of killer he is, a little bit more calculated. And you can also see the kind of killer that Stu is from just how frantic he is. And if we really, a fun game that I like to play in this movie is guessing who did what killings throughout the film. And I think that Stu is the one who ended up stabbing Casey the night before, because they used to go out and she dumped him. So that was definitely a revenge kill. And if you look, I watched it with audio commentary. Wes Craven, R.I.P., said that when Casey pulled off the mask, there's this blink and you miss it flash of recognition in her face when she looks at the killer's face. She was seeing Stu's face before he stabbed her. That was Stu, and it was definitely jumping forward to where you brought us when Sydney was attacked. That was Billy, for sure. It was 100% Billy, and before we get to the chase, I also want to give Sydney her flowers for just how well written this scene is and how well she acts it. Just the beats of, oh, you want to know what my favorite scary movie is? When she like picks her nose, she's like bullshitting them, she's looking around. This movie does such a good job with her character and making her someone you want to follow, not just in this film, but in multiple films. Like, Steve, what did you like about Sydney? Shut the fuck up.
She was hot. No, I'm kidding. I mean, the movie immediately speaks to like what was the final female? Is that what
the
you
final
called it?
Girl?
The final girl. See, I was trying to think it was nicer than it actually was. They talked about the final girl thought, and she actually talks about it in this monologue, being like they run up the stairs instead of out the front door, which is just insulting, which she then does like 2 seconds later. She
tries to leave,
up the front
but yeah.
She tries to leave, but she can't. But yeah, then she goes up the stairs after she throttles Ghostface. But I do like that they write her, and again, like, this movie is both a satire of and a love letter to, in my opinion, the horror genre. It doesn't take itself seriously enough to be like a full-fledged... And I think this is why spoilers, I like this movie. I think that's why I ended up liking this movie more than I was frightened by the movie, because I was able to identify that I didn't have to take it seriously very quickly. I think if you give me a movie that forces me to take it seriously the whole time, those are going to be the ones where I was like, nope, didn't like that one bit, because I was scared brainless the whole time, which I know you're saying that because I know if we have movies that are going to make me do that the whole time. So great. Can't wait for that. But this one, after the first scene, I felt like there was so much tongue-in-cheek energy, especially with a character we're about to be introduced to, who was one of my favorite characters, which was Dewey, aka David Arquette. There was just so much comedy injected into this movie that it allowed me to relax a little bit. And I also know that some of the more horror-focused scenes are also very campy and iconic. So I was looking forward to, basically, there's like really at this point 2 more big action set pieces. But before we get into this part, we have to get into the attack with Sydney by... spoilers, it was Billy and the ghost face. I mean, if you don't know the answers to the questions of this movie already, I regret to inform you that you're nearly 30 years too late. So sorry about that. But so one big thing that happens is the fight is happening. She's in her room.
Yeah. Billy appears. I think she tried to call the cops. I think she used her computer to call the cops.
That's what it was. Yes. She got on it because the phone wasn't working, so she got on the computer.
Very clever. No one had done that in a horror film before.
She's not a final girl. She's a final woman. Okay.
She's underage, but
I'm a motherfucking woman. But while Billy, he's like, oh, I heard the screaming and I came running. And the door was locked or whatever, which is true. The door was locked because he was already in the house. And it seems like he's comforting her. And again, I think this is the movie being like, this is the guy. He drops a cell phone out of his pocket. And Cindy very rightfully was like, nah, hold on one motherfucking second. They have a really funny jump scare where she opens the front door and it's Dewey holding the ghost face mask, and they all get taken into the station, and Sydney points the finger at Billy because, again, why the fuck wouldn't you? I think that's the correct move, and he gets put into jail. But while he's in jail, she gets a call from the killer, and so you're made to think that the killer can't be Billy because Billy's in jail. So there's this whole like, oh my God, who is it moment. The second set that they're throwing out there, I think that they start to establish here, is that they're trying to get in touch with her dad, and they can't find him. They thought they knew where he was. He wasn't actually at the hotel that he said he was going to be at, and so her dad is in the wind. So suddenly we get kind of like an everybody's a suspect moment. But we're about to meet Courtney Cox, who is another iconic character in this series, not just
fucking
star, absolute star. Acting like a star, for sure.
She fucking eats this role. She's probably my favorite character in this first
She was
film.
great. So I want to pass it to you to kind of like go through the introduction of Gale Weathers, aka Courtney Cox, aka Gale Weathers.
Absolutely, Steve. Already under considerable stress, Sydney is forced to deal with the scandalization of her own attack by ambitious tabloid television newswoman Gale Weathers, who is the author of a tell-all book revealing the promiscuous affair between Sydney's mother and her convicted killer, Cotton Weary. School is soon canceled as a precautionary measure, leaving the building temporarily abandoned. The school principal is then killed while still inside the school when he was distracted. Before I forget,
shout out
the Fonz.
Henry Winkler.
Yeah, Henry Winkler.
Emerson alum.
Also, he gave my graduation speech, my commencement speech for grad school back in, I believe it was 2013, 2012 or 2013. I graduated from my master's program. He was so wonderful.
That's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. There's one of my favorite podcasts that I like to listen to for movies I've seen before, movies that I want to watch, is called The Rewatchables. And they have this award called the Dion Waiters Award. And basically, this is a sports reference, but Dion Waiters was this basketball player who just always had confidence shooting the ball, basically. And he was very talented. He could go, basically, as someone who played for like 8 minutes and scored like 15 points. Like just came in, filled it up, and then he was gone for the rest of the game. Henry Winkler in this movie is far and away the Dion Waiters Award winner, because he's in like 3 scenes. You could tell he was there for like a day and a half.
Oh, less.
Like, hey, just like
less.
Henry, come.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe like 6 hours. We're gonna have everyone think that you're the murderer for about 5 minutes, and then we're gonna kill you violently. And then he's gone, and it was amazing. Like he talks shit to he like expels 2 guys, and then he gets killed. And
he chewed so much damn scenery. He chewed all of the scenery. He chewed so much scenery, there were like bite marks just all over the furniture. God. It was so good, but he does it in such a great way. The great thing about character actors like Henry Winkler is he is intelligent enough to know what kind of film he's in. And I find it very impressive that he understood the tone of this movie when no other movie had attempted to bend genre the way that Scream had. Henry's such a fucking pro. So much respect for him. Have you seen Barry?
I have not seen Barry.
Is so
but
good.
It's incredible,
He's one
right?
of the lead characters in that. Yeah. And I'm not going to tell you what his arc is, but Barry has a chef's kiss of a series finale and just a series run in general. But I digress. Courtney Cox, complete star, and I'm a little annoyed that we never got to see more of her doing roles like this. But then again, she's been in every film of this franchise, so maybe this is her role. This is her role to do that.
Yeah.
But let's play a fun... So, Friends. If you're looking at the Friends cast, how would you rank them in terms of acting ability? I think that they're all talented. The acting ability, I think they're all talented, but I have a strong ranking of where I think everybody falls in terms of, okay, this character...
Let's do this.
You do it. Give me yours and I'll give you mine.
I think number 1 is Lisa Kudrow with the bullet. I think number 2 is Courtney Cox.
Okay, interesting.
I think the women carry that show, and I think number 3 is Jennifer Aniston. I think number 4 is, rest in peace, Matthew Perry. I think number 5 is Matt LeBlanc, and I think number 6 is David Schwimmer. I think David Schwimmer fucking sucks.
You know what's funny? David Schwimmer is my number 1.
He's your number 1?
David Schwimmer is my number 1. He's not my favorite character on Friends. My favorite character, my 2 favorite characters.
Oh, he would also be last as if I did my favorite character rankings in Friends.
Yeah.
He would be by far last.
I don't care for Ross, but I love David Schwimmer. And you know why? David Schwimmer does physical comedy better than anyone else on that show. If you really are looking at the way that those different actors emote and the way that they move through their scenes. In the beginning, I think David is obviously the leader in so many ways when everybody else was finding their footing. So I think, and I did a series watch of Friends sometime in my 20s, and that's actually when it hit me. I'm like, wow, David Schwimmer's really, really talented, and I'd taken him for granted. I think David Schwimmer's easier to take for granted because he doesn't have the flashier character. Like Joey has a gimmick. Matthew Perry, may he rest in peace, also extremely talented. But my ranking, David Schwimmer, number 1. Lisa Kudrow, number 2. I think that Lisa Kudrow is one of those lightning in a bottle actresses that she just seemed to have that character in her bones, in her body when she was Phoebe. It's like, oh wow, you're just fucking funny and you're making this look effortless. So I would put her as number 2. Number 3, and I go back and forth on this, Jennifer Aniston is my number 3. And what she does so well, I think she's so present. She's so present with everybody. They're all really present, but I think she's present in a way that she can bounce off of and have charisma with anyone because she listens really well and her reactions are spot on. She can hear the most outrageous thing and she'll just pause and just go like, I mean, it's important that you think that. And she'll do like a reaction like that. See? And it's funny. It's fucking funny because she just has this it factor oozing out of her. And I know we're talking about Scream, but I'll get to Courtney Cox. And for my number 4, I would say Matthew Perry, because Matthew was just able to just be this sarcasm machine, and definitely with the way that he would change a sentence, make almost anything funny. I would put Matt LeBlanc over Courtney Cox, only because of...
Are you putting her last?
I'm putting her last, but I don't think that she's bad. I just think that the writing did a disservice to her towards the end of the show.
I'm going to admit really quickly that I expanded my consideration of them as performers into their whole body of work as well. So I might have a different rating for them if I thought of them just as performers inside of Friends.
Yeah.
So I would have to maybe recalculate on that.
No worries.
I think Matthew Perry would be higher for me, and I think maybe that would be it.
I think that Friends is just a great show to study in terms of ensemble writing. I think that I don't have any aspiration to be a sitcom writer, but that is definitely the blueprint. And I think that Abbott Elementary is this generation's version of that. And they are flying in terms of what they're doing right now. But that's my ranking. But going back to Courtney Cox, I don't think that show utilized what she could do, because they just made her this neat freak who was obsessed with cleaning, and she kind of just became a caricature of OCD. They kind of all, except for Rachel and Ross at the very end, became caricatures. This character, Gale Weathers, she has a larger than life quality that could be cartoonish in the hands of another lesser actress, but Courtney just puts so many layers inside of her, and I would say that this character, not Monica, is her best work.
I do think that her being known as Monica helps you believe that she could play somebody that cares more about the story than the human at first. And
really?
She does yeah, I do think that helps aid in the, hopefully they does kill more. I think she alludes to that. She makes some sort of offhanded joke where Dewey's like, what? Hold on a second. But then clearly there's a growth into, and even talking about how her book sales are going to go crazy because she's the one who saves the day and stops the murder and stuff like that. I think eventually it becomes, and I've seen Scream now twice, and I've never seen any of the others, so I can't speak to the arc that she goes on beyond this movie. But it does seem like she decides to care about other humans a little bit more than the story by the end of this movie. But at the beginning here, and I want to talk about two things. I want to talk about the fucking punch in the face that she takes when she gets introduced into the story, and then I want to get into the rules of horror movies that are established in this next scene in the video store. But do you have anything about the punch and the final establishment of Gale Weathers before we move on to the movie store and the party?
No, I adore Rose McGowan's reenactment of that. It's like, I'll send you a copy. Bam! Bitch goes down. Oh, super bitch. It's so funny. It's so silly. I wish that her character had lived to go on to the sequels.
I do want to talk about this next scene in the video store because, again, I do think the movie tells us that Billy's the bad guy here, but the conversation is between Stu and Randy. Stu is one of the killers, and Randy is, I believe he works at the video store. It makes it very clear that he's a huge film buff. He's a huge horror film buff, and this is where they start to discuss the rules of horror films, and then at the party they actually go over all of the rules of the horror films, but they also talk about motive, and there's always has to be a stupid motive for a reason that someone would want to kill their girlfriend, and basically is like, well, he wants to kill her because she's not having, basically she's a prude, she's not fucking the guy, so she wants to kill him. A, this is a little true, which I think is fucking hilarious. And B, as they're loudly having this conversation, and Randy be like, everybody's a suspect, I could be the murderer, and all of these people looking at them really strange, being like, the fuck are you talking about? And then going back to their business. I thought this was a very underrated scene.
Oh.
Only because, again, I think the movie is constantly telling you what it is
A good
the entire
horror
time,
film.
while at the same time subverting your
A
opinion.
good horror film will always tell you what's going to happen because that enriches the people like being told what's going to happen on a very subliminal level without it being spoon-fed to them because it enhances the rewatchability of anything. Yeah, I think that's that's a good catch. That's also a really good scene because it's doing multiple things. You're seeing how Stu is as a serial killer and you're seeing how Billy is as a serial killer. Look at the looks that Billy gives and look at the looks that Stu gives. I mean, when Stu is told that his parents are going to be told, he's like, my mom's going to be so mad at me. So he's definitely, I think, honestly, like straight up, Stu just wants to suck Billy's dick. I truly think that this is like a very homoerotic. Like, no.
Well, it's fair. At one point, she's like, what's your excuse? And he just goes, very susceptible to peer pressure.
Mm-hmm. Scary Movie even made fun of that.
Echoes.
They were like, but you made love to me. But yeah, I definitely think that that's my headcanon.
Yeah, I mean, we have another, if we're talking about iconic scenes in film history, I feel like one of these upcoming scenes is pretty
Absolutely. Iconic. Later that night, everyone begins to show up for the party that Stu had suggested they hold in honor of getting out of school so early on. At first, the party is fine as Sydney and Tatum show up. Soon after, so do Dewey and Gale. The party soon takes a turn for the worse afterward as Tatum goes down to the garage to get a beer, only to be cornered by the killer, who slashes her left arm as she attempts to escape. Spotting an opportunity to get out through the pet flap in the automatic garage door, she tries to escape, but the killer stops her short by turning the door on, sending her to the top and crushing her neck. I don't think that this garage door would have killed her. I don't think that it's moving that fast. It wasn't moving fast enough. The garage door, Steve,
for the way that it reacted, it like exploded.
It had to rocketed, shot all the way up.
Turbo boost garage.
Snap her neck.
Yeah.
She would have been stuck, and at the bare minimum, it would have been uncomfortable.
That's what Scary Movie should have done. Just her like bonking her head against it a couple of times, and then it just slowly goes back down. But if we're playing the game, who was the killer? It had to have been Stu this time, because isn't this Stu's girlfriend in the... No, because Stu's in the living room, right? So it's Billy.
Stu is hosting. And if you pay attention, like, Billy appears right after this.
Because of the rules of the horror movie are also happening at the same time, where Rand is explaining to a groaning party that, like, you have to be, if you're a virgin, you survive, and...
Don't split up. Don't say you'll be back. Don't have sex.
Oh, yeah, never say I'll be back. No, don't have sex. Yeah, because then... What Sid goes to go get it, or Stu goes to go get a beer, and he's like, "I'll be there."
And I was like, "Oh!" And also that whole living room, not one of those sons of bitches looks like a teenager. I was looking, just cackling. I'm like, who from the grip department did they grab just to fill this frame?
Yeah. Also, no one at any point goes, "Where the fuck is Tatum?"
No.
Tatum dies violently and loudly in a garage door, and at no point does anybody ask where she is.
Also,
I guess to be fair, they're also getting violently drunk watching horror movies, so I guess no one's going to wonder.
They're getting violently drunk, but a lot of them
kind of funny.
Wouldn't some of them kind of round to the back of the house and see her hanging from there? I'd be like, help a girl out. Let's talk about the scene with Tatum and Billy, because it was definitely Billy behind the mask.
Right.
What did you think of this scene? Aside from the garage door.
Where she was like, oh, role play? She's not a final girl, dude.
But she fought. She
fought
built
back,
for it, though.
I think they wanted the death to feel more tragic because it's technically her bestie, even though we don't really get much of a second thought other than her like seeing her in horror and then running away. But I think even the fighting back is like, that death was so elaborate. I think they were trying to make it mean a little bit more than like Henry Winkler just got stabbed a couple times, so then he was done.
Yeah, because you knew that
it was almost like a way of honoring the character in a way.
It was, and I think this film does a really great job at something that not a lot of the female victims in Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street or Halloween got to do, which is fight back. I love that she picked up bottles. She had him on the ropes a couple of times. And when he was on the stairs, that was the moment for her to just start beating the shit out of him. I don't understand how she fell into, I think, shovels or something, and she didn't think to grab one and just throttle him. I think the trick to Ghostface is that people are so terrified of Ghostface that they don't compute that they should just go and fight him.
And so 2 things happen after Tatum gets kind of like wrapped up and brutally murdered in the garage door is that Gale and Kenny are on the scene. Gale links up with Dewey and they go and check on everybody. And there's this like super icy scene in the house, and maybe a little bit of understanding between the 2 characters happens, Sydney and Gale. But Gale's really just there to plant a camera and keep an eye on things that are happening. But something that is acknowledged and then promptly forgotten by the cameraman is that there's about a 30-second delay, because he watched Gale walk out with Dewey, and then all of a sudden there's a knock at the van, and he's like, oh, there must be a delay. Back at the party, the only person who's concerned about Tatum is obviously Sydney. So she's going around trying to find Tatum, and Billy, clearly having just murdered Tatum, intercepts her and is like, let's go upstairs and talk. We don't need to go look for your friend. Your friend's totally fine. She's getting beers. Let's go upstairs and talk. The partygoers find out about the principal's death, so they want to go look because they're psychotic. I believe Sid is the ringleader of that one, being like, oh, let's go check him out before they take him off of the goalpost, which is just psychotic behavior. But the fact that they're all like, yeah, let's do that. Let's look at our principal's body. That's like
so fucking weird.
Good stuff.
That's so weird.
The 90s. Super weird. Outside, Dewey and Gale are walking together, and they almost get hit by all the kids driving frantically to the high school to, again, try and see the disemboweled body of their principal hanging from the goalposts. And they jump off of the road, and Dewey saves Gale, and Dewey kisses Gale, and it seems like Gale's get the story of at all cost facade is maybe breaking a little bit. She's maybe fallen for this cute guy Dewey, who's 26 now, but he was 25 for a whole year. So or what was it? I'm suddenly recalling the line. She's like, I was very popular in the 11 to 24 demographic. That's objectively a thing you don't say to people. You don't say that. And then he was like, well, I'm 25 now, but I was 24 for a whole year. I don't know why I gave him a Southern drawl. I don't think he was Southern.
And just in spirit,
Alabama
to me. He is. In spirit.
It gave.
And I'll just say that.
But we'll leave it at that. Wiki Wild Wild West. Anyway, a movie that I would not hate covering on this podcast. I used to watch Wild Wild West over and over again. I fucking love that movie. Anyway, here's the craziest thing that I think happens in this movie. It's the year anniversary of her mom dying. She is almost murdered literally 12 hours beforehand. 3 other people have been brutally murdered at this point. Disemboweled. Everyone has left the house. The serial killer is actively on the loose. The cop is nowhere to be found. This is the moment. And might I add, her boyfriend has just killed somebody and is acting as creepy as ever. And this is the moment that Sydney goes, yeah, what the fuck? Charlie, I literally went, what? Why now? I guess she's like, I should be over it. Like, I'm moving forward. It's been a whole year. Like, you've been so patient with me. Has he? Has he been patient with you? He's literally killing people because he has not been patient with you. And so then they fade to black, and it's like, okay, he's like, are you okay? First of all, that's definitely something, that's 100% that's the most accurate thing that the movie did, was him being like, are you good? And Cher being like, yeah, no, I think so. There's that little awkward rigmarole that you do.
I'm sure it was very
from 20 years ago.
Very sweet of him to check in on her after what I'm sure was just 3 thrusts. And 4 minutes of sex.
I mean, if he was that pent up, I'm sure it wasn't that long. And then they promptly try and throw. It's almost like he knew that this was going to happen too, because we're getting into Act 3 at this point. He's immediately stabbed by Ghostface. At this point, if you're watching this for the first time, and I remember my reaction watching this for the first time going, oh, okay, I guess it wasn't him. I wonder who it's going to be, because I guess it wasn't him after all. And she attempts to escape, so she thinks that Billy's dead now, and you have this very obvious, like, he turns around and has, like, the Mission Impossible moment where you see the fake blood all over him, and you think it's coming from out of his stomach, and she gets pushed out of a window.
All right. So
it was really cool. This is a good action
everything
scene.
from her getting pushed out of the window to her coming back into the house for that kitchen confrontation is chef's kiss. Chef's kiss.
It's very good. It's very well done. She sees Tatum's body wedged in the pet door, and this is like that moment of shock. And then Randy, who's watching television like a drunk asshole, being like, he's right behind you. The killer's right behind you, as Ghostface is approaching behind him. I thought that was fantastic. And then the dumbass camera guy sees this all happening, forgets that there's a 30-second delay. So after he brings Sydney into the van, he's like, oh, I'm going to go. But Ghostface hears all the screaming, leaves Randy, not killed, and runs out. So as soon as the cameraman opens the van, he gets killed by Ghostface. I believe this Ghostface is Billy.
I think it's Stu.
Right?
It's
No,
Stu.
this Ghostface is Stu because Billy's dead. Right. Not me absolutely knowing these answers. And then, so he gets killed, and Randy's still alive at this point. Gale and Dewey, in their makeout session, discover that there's the car next to them is actually the car of Sydney's dad. So now we're thinking, oh, it's Sydney's dad who's the killer because he left his car there. So he's the one fucking shit up right now, which would make sense. He's going on a spree a year later. So they find the car. They run back to the house. They think that the dad is the killer and that he's come to the party to continue the spree. They spread out and they get attacked. Now Ghostface is on them. Gale attempts to leave the scene in the van, but finds the dead cameraman like in this super creepy, like the blood going over the windshield, sliding down on top of the van. And she's like, oh no, not great. And Dewey, who went inside, is revealed to come out of the house with a knife in his back. So you think Dewey's dead. And inside, Sydney finds Randy and Stu, who are the only two people left. And they're accusing each other of being the killer. One of them is right, but neither of them actually knows. And she's basically just like, fuck both of you.
Important to note.
Locks it, which honestly...
Not no to her doing that, not no. Also, important distinction
Smart.
Between Stu and Randy. Randy doesn't ask for the gun. Stu does. That's something I caught.
Stu was asking for the gun the whole time.
Give me the gun, Sydney.
Sydney, baby, give me the gun. I gotta protect us.
Mm-hmm.
It was good. That's a good call. That's a very, very good call. Billy then reappears, not dead because, you know, he didn't even get stabbed. And Sydney very egregiously, she goes from making a very good move to a very bad move because he has successfully convinced her that he's not the killer. And Billy now has the gun and he opens the door and lets Randy in, who's like, Stu's gone crazy. And Billy, quoting Alice in Wonderland, goes, we all go a little mad sometimes. And then shoots Randy in the shoulder. I think right before he shoots Randy in the shoulder, he says something to the effect of like, oh, I've never been so glad to be a virgin before in my life. And then he gets shot immediately after saying that, kind of playing into the rules trope that they're going against the whole time. Sydney, totally gobsmacked. And this is when we start getting the truth revealed to us that Billy's blood wound is corn syrup, a common movie horror trope for productions when they're using blood. And turns to Stu, who has the voice-changing box, and the truth is revealed that the murders were planned and carried out by both Billy and Stu. And not only were these murders carried out by Billy and Stu, but the original murder of his mother was done because Sydney's mother was having an affair with Billy's dad, and this is what caused his family to break up. So Billy is also exacting his revenge on Sydney and her family as sort of like a revenge for that. And I guess part of that revenge was having sex with Sydney before he tried to murder her. But technically, like, if we're going by success count, technically he was 75% successful. If we're going by the amount of, like, he was pretty close. He just didn't get to kill Sydney.
He could have killed her.
Pretty good job until he started
Till he monologued.
It's always the monologuing. It's
he should have just shut the fuck up.
I'm the Underminer.
No capes. Oh man, it was a lot. They talked a lot, and look at the way that Stu puts his head on Billy's shoulder after it. He's totally.
Oh my god, he's such a pet. He gives what's that Gilbert Gottfried as the parrot in Aladdin. He gives that.
Oh my god, you read my mind. Iago.
Yeah,
he's giving Iago.
He does give Iago. Yeah.
Oh man, for sure.
But I think one of the other things that I want to actually give Billy and Stu credit for is they actually, and it kind of makes it even funnier that they just completely unravel like this by the end, is that they actually successfully framed Cotton Weary as well, who had nothing to do with it, really. And they just like knew that this was happening, so they were able to kind of pin all of this on him, which is very impressive. They abducted Sydney's father, and it was his cell phone that they were using to make these ominous calls. Of course, there's no caller ID back then, so you're not going to figure out these numbers that are being called and who's going to trace back to her. And obviously, they traced it back to her, those calls from her father's number. I guess that was something we skipped over, is that the police... Another thing the movie does to think that it's her father is that the calls that get traced back to her dad. So they abducted him, they got his phone, and... they then start stabbing each other because at the end of the day, they're just like crazy.
Are they
And
crazy, or are they just consummating their relationship? I think it's one.
I guess so.
I think it's one, but I'm not going to say which.
I guess if that's their way that they could appropriately be inside of each other in 1996, because it wasn't
no homo.
quite socially
No
acceptable
homo.
back then. No homo, but I just wanted to stab you a little bit just to see how.
I just wanted to feel your insides.
They start stabbing each other. So this is the other version of they monologue. They both monologued, and then they started stabbing each other because they were monologuing too much. And I think Stu starts getting a little. Oh, well, part of the reason why they were stabbing each other was to make it look like they were attacked by the killer and that the killer got away. But then they got a little bit too into it. Stu got a little jealous. Billy stabs him so many times that he starts to bleed too much. And he's like, I'm getting woozy, man. I'm getting real woozy, bro. Not really feeling good, man. And then Sydney is able to manage to escape while they're dealing with Gale. And Sydney is able to stab Billy with an umbrella out of a closet, which was...
What is she, the
crazy.
penguin?
He falls to the floor. Almost dead for the second time. Total Colin Farrell, take notes. You've got a character to embody very soon. And... Stu reappears trying to fight Sydney before we get another iconic death scene of the television getting crushed on his head. So Stu's finally gone. And then Billy gets up and he begins to, for the third time now, I guess this is the first time he's been like egregiously injured. I guess the first time he was not. So this is the first time he gets up from being seemingly dead. This is another horror trope, by the way, is the killer seemingly being dead and then coming back to life, and then seemingly being dead and then coming back to life a bunch of times. And he's choking Sydney, and Billy, like, he punches Randy to the floor, and he gets shot down by Gale, who remembers to take the safety off that time. And Randy, very smartly, being like, according to horror movie law, he's gonna come back to life for one last jump scare. And to their surprise, Billy makes one last grunt and opens his eyes, and then Sydney just shoots him right in the fucking face. And that is the end of Billy. Like, no hesitation. And I think that's another credit for Sydney, is that she doesn't even hesitate. She just stone cold. She just Terminators that shit. Just puts one between the eyes. And Dewey seemingly is dead, even though, spoilers, Dewey's not dead. And Gale makes an impromptu report on the events, and the authorities finally come to the scene. And that is the absolute frantic, not mess, because it's really fun and actually really well done, conclusion to the movie that is Scream. Charlie, I'm stoked that we started out with this one. I think that this is a good, if you are not a horror person and you can deal with a little blood and maybe being stressed out for like the first 10 or so minutes, I think you can do Scream. I think I maybe balked a little bit too hard at this, and now I'm probably going to regret it when I go into the rest of these movies with my defensives lowered. So good job, Tatum.
Yeah. Did that shit on purpose. Yeah, Scream
Did that shit on
Scream
purpose.
is a really brilliant film. I have thoughts on all of the sequels. I think I've enjoyed every sequel that came after the original, but the original is just so perfect. I think it's a masterpiece. I don't really have any notes about it because look at where we are. We are how many years later, and we're about to get Scream 8. Like this script for Scream 8.
It's the Fast and Furious of horror movies.
It really is. It really is. Everything I had to say about this film, I've already said, but I think it does everything that a horror film should do. I think it's really well paced. The writing is impeccable. The twists are good. I love the final girl character, Sidney Prescott. It's a lot. And you laugh at that term because of sociopolitics.
Because I don't think it's a compliment.
No. It's a horror,
but
it's
this movie
film.
makes it a compliment.
It is one of the highest compliments in the horror genre. It's a compliment. Like, trust me.
Well, I agree with you because I think this film made a point of changing the perception of it. Because they state very clearly in the beginning of this movie that the final girl is just like the one who just happens to make it to the end by whatever reason. That isn't necessarily because she's smart, strong, intelligent.
Oh, they're
I
all
think.
strong, smart, and intelligent. Like, so many great, like Laurie Strode from Halloween. We're talking Nancy from Nightmare on Elm Street. We're talking...
These are all movies I've never
Sue
seen.
Snell
So you could
from
definitely...
Harry.
Yeah, I'm looking to be wrong.
These are all great. Ellen Ripley from Alien. Like, all final girls. And all are the reason why I'm protective of Final Girl as an archetype is because they are the blueprint for my favorite character of all time, Buffy Summers. That's why,
Snaps to that. Shout out to Slayer.
Shout out to Slayer Fest. But you gonna learn today. So I was thinking it would be fun for our ranking to do Jiffy Pop.
Jiffy Pop? Why Jiffy Pop?
Because that's what Drew Barrymore fails to make in the cold open.
Oh, why did I think of... I literally just pictured like a peanut butter popsicle because like Jif peanut butter and pop. That's great.
All right, so I'm giving this 5 out of 5 Jiffy Pops. No notes. It is an absolute classic. If you want to learn, also read the damn script. If you want to know how to do horror well, read Scream and watch it.
I've heard that you can learn things about the film industry by reading scripts. I couldn't tell you by experience, but that's what we have Charlie for. I'm going to give it 4.5 Jiffy Pops. And I think I would need to not feel uncomfortable 100% of the time if I was going to truly enjoy a horror movie, or be thrilled by the fact that I was uncomfortable, and that did not 100% happen in this movie. So it's gonna get 4, which I also understand is like the point of horror movies. So I understand that I'm probably like not the target audience for movies like this, but who knows, maybe I'll get surprised by something. So I'm gonna give it 4.5 Jiffy Pops. But I'm glad that we watched it, and I'm always glad to talk about this stuff with you because that is more than half the fun of doing it. So thanks as always for being your usual Scream Queen.
Yes, this has been great.
Yeah, man. I'm stoked to be back with you for season 2. Again, what's time? What are seasons? Well, we're going to record when we can record, and when we take breaks, you'll like it because we'll be back rested and rejuvenated, and maybe even with some sweet blonde hair. That's for you YouTube watchers. So that's going to do it for this episode of Charlie and Steve Watch Stuff. Don't forget, you can follow us on the Instagrams at Charlie and Steve Watch Stuff Pod. This is spooky season. We've got a bunch of spooky ass movies coming your way. So hang out at the Instagram, hang out wherever you get your podcasts, or on the YouTube. If you haven't subscribed to Charlie and Steve Watch Stuff on YouTube and you're literally watching us on YouTube right now, I'm not entirely. Just hit that like button, smash that sub button like Billy and Stu would have smashed each other in 2024, then all of those people wouldn't have died. It would have saved a lot of murdering. But for myself, Steve Selnick, and my good friend Charlie Peppers, we will look forward to seeing you on the next one. Goodbye, friends.
Bye.